Okay, now I would like to explain for the introductions for function resistance training. So, we are all know that injuries can happen in the gyms, but how many times that you have hurt someone that injured at their back carrying groceries or tweaking their knees walking up the stairs? Injuries from routine activities happen more often than the people would like to admit. That's why the functional strength training is such a very hot topic these days. Functional resistance training is defined as the training that attempts to mimic the specific physiological demands of real life activities. Functional training such as resistance, exercise, and body weight movements can help you become stronger, more flexible, and better equipped to handle day-to-day feats of strength and athleticism that are often overlooked. Plus, it can help you become less injury prone. But there is something you need to know about functional trainings. There are differences between the functional resistance trainings for daily activities and the functional resistance training for sports. This is because their objectives are different among them. As we know that traditional functional resistance trainings is more for improving their strength and mobility to perform better daily activities. Meanwhile, functional resistance training for sports is more focusing on movement or skill of the specific sports. Eric Salvador once said, the main word of here is the functions. The function is for the purpose. So functional training is just training that have a purpose. So this is for the introduction for functional resistance training.
Hi guys, so this functional resistance training, it has a few effects on your physiological body. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you the effect, and the first one is there is increase the blood concentration of your hormones. Okay, so there is an immediate increase in epinephrine and norepinephrine with resistance exercise. So the blood glucose, it increased by these hormones, and it is responsible to increase force production, muscle contraction rate, and energy production. So this has a few studies. Okay, these hormones starts to increase prior to the resistance training workout. This is a preceding response of the body preparing for the challenging exercise to follow. Now, the elevated blood glucose levels, they do not typically lead to an increase in insulin unless the protein or carbohydrate supplementation precedes the workout. Now, the increased uptake of blood glucose by the skeletal muscle occurs because of the increase in function of the cell's glucose transporters. Now, this will increase the glucose uptake and thus glucose metabolism in the muscle cell. Now, this has proven that regular resistance exercise training has been shown to increase insulin sensitivity, meaning the body can intake and utilize glucose more effectively. Okay, so the next effect is your testosterone will increase in its concentration. So your testosterone levels is at different levels throughout the day, and it is typically the highest in the morning and lowest in the afternoon, but this also varies among individuals. Now, research has found that anaerobic workouts may have a higher impact on testosterone in the evening, and as a result, the short boost from your exercise session, it might be even bigger if you schedule it in the evening instead of after waking up in the morning, okay, before your breakfast. Now, however, the increased testosterone concentration does provide an indirect marker of motor unit activation and metabolic demands beyond, and it is typically associated with increased receptor binding. Now, this heavy resistance training using 1 or 2 repetitions in low volume, which may not cause any changes in testosterone concentrations after a workout. Now, it could potentially still increase the absolute number of receptors and thus binding sites available to testosterone. Now, however, this effect on receptors has yet to be fully researched. Okay, so for our next effect is on women. Okay, so we know that the basic knowledge that we have is that women has lower testosterone compared to men. Okay, so as we all know, the basic knowledge. And in 1983, the study of testosterone levels in men and women after lifting weights found that men experienced significant increases of testosterone while women experienced almost no increase. Okay, this was done in 1983. Okay, and there was another study in 2001. They showed that women found that resistance training can temporarily increase testosterone and have an impact on fat distributions. Okay, so for our last effect is the growth hormone. Okay, for during our functional resistance training, our growth hormone responses positively. Okay, so there was another study. Okay, they researched and tested the effects of 12 weeks of resistance training on the isometric strength, the explosive power, and selected functional abilities of healthy women aged 75 and over. So in this study, they saw significant improvements, significant improvement from 4 out of 5 the exercises measured. Okay, these effects are more to scientific. Okay, so the next slide is on the why the athletes need to do the functional training.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Halima. Okay, today I will explain to you about why athletes need functional resistance training. Okay, first to expose athlete to the movement that mimic with the specific sport. Okay, basically when athlete perform the functional, there are many multi-joint exercises that mimic the type of body movement in a specific in a certain sport. So when doing the functional training, so basically we will avoid to train in a straight linear and backward movement because that is not the sport are played. Okay, second, to improve coordination, balance and body awareness, which means that when athletes move their body in a way that recruit multiple muscle group at once, requires a certain level of coordination, focus and core strength, which is why compound movements are so good for building core strength and stability. The more you train functionally, the better you will become at working your entire body as one system, which means that it help you improve your coordination. Okay, functional training also give you an excellent kinesthetic move, which is the awareness of how your body move, and it teach you how to move safely. Okay, next, the athlete will be able to perform skill with multiple planes, which means that when training for any sport, athlete will work for various planes of motion because the body never use just one muscle group. This usually consists of performing movement side to side, front to back and at angles. And lastly, athlete will improve real in-game skills and technique behavior. Okay, now I will explain about before starting functional training for athlete. Okay, first divide the training into 5 days per week for at least an hour per session. Second, do the 5 to 6 functional exercises that incorporate upper and lower body movement. Okay, third, start with moderate weight and intensity, then increase the weight and intensity. Okay, next, pay attention to form, especially with core, mainly abdomen and hips and shoulder stability. And lastly, do the warm-up before training and cooling down after the training.
Assalamualaikum and hi, so my name is Anik Danish. So today I'm going to explain about functional strength training versus traditional strength training. So let's focus on functional first, alright guys? So functional focus on movement and rarely do an isolation exercise. So commonly in functional, we use compound whole body while doing the exercise. So it requires dynamic activation. In functional, we mimic activities of daily living and sporting activities. So the athletes and sports persons do like to do functional strength training. So while doing the functional strength training, movement may involve trunk rotation and limbs crossing the midline. So not to forget, the movement may be in multiple planes and commonly require coordination and concentration. Alright guys, so remember for functional strength training that I say, this is the keywords. So next, we are focusing on traditional. Like I said before, functional focus on movement while traditional focus on muscles. So commonly isolation exercise is done in traditional. So occasionally compound exercise and rarely whole body movements are involved and rarely require dynamic activation in traditional. So we can say that it is not like functional that mimics everyday activities or sporting activities, but usually traditional strength training is used by the bodybuilders. They like to do the traditional strength training. So in traditional, we are rarely use or involve trunk rotation or limbs crossing the midline and movement typically in a single plane of motion. And in traditional, we don't use or require coordination or concentration such functional strength need. Alright guys? Alright, simple one. Alright, I'm gonna explain also about large muscle groups versus small muscle groups. So your bigger muscle groups are the hamstring, gluteus, quadricep, back and chest, and your smaller muscle groups consist of shoulder, tricep, bicep and calf. Alright, so next I'm gonna explain how to design a resistance training program for your sport. Alright, so resistance training is now accepted as an integral and crucial part of any athlete's training plan. So unlike the generic strength training routine found in the fitness magazine, sport-specific strength conditioning involves a few more design variables and take a lot more planning. This guide outlines the 7 steps to design effective resistance training programs for sport. So step 1, evaluation and assessment. So the first step, and perhaps the most important, is to evaluate the characteristics of the sport and to assess the athlete's physical profile. So evaluating the sport, ultimately a resistance program should mirror the movement patterns of the sport as closely as it's feasible. Alright, for example, alright, Ali play football and he's a football player. We do training, we give him a training from badminton training program. So basically, two sports are two different approach. Okay, so in football we kick the ball, while badmintons use racket to smash the shuttlecock. Different approach and it's not suitable. Okay, so it's really important for step 1. Second, step 2 is exercise selection. So once a movement analysis of the sport has been considered and the strength objective for the program is set, for example hypertrophy or maximum strength or power or strength endurance, the most appropriate exercise can be selected. Okay, and we go next to step 3, frequency. So frequency, many athletes choose to lift weight in 3 workouts a week. This often works well, allowing sufficient recovery time and fits nicely into the 7-day week. More advanced lifter may benefit from a 4, 5 or 7, 6-day a week program. So frequency, we can put as it's important to take the phase of the season into consideration. Alright, so like off season maybe we can frequency of the training will be 4 to 7 session per week, and when pre-season we can do 3 to 4 session per week for resistance training. When in season 1 to 2 session per week, and transition we can do 0 or 3 session per week. Alright, remember this is important, okay guys, to do a training program. And next we go to step 4, exercise order. So the order in which exercise are performed in a session should not be overlooked. Sports conditioning is more demanding than general fitness training, and with various forms of training often take place in the week. It's important to maximize overload to recovery ratio. And next we go to step 5. Alright guys, are you with me? Okay, so step 5 is loading and repetition. So assigning the right intensity or load to the exercise depend on the two main factors: the training objective and the athlete's current level of strength. So loads are usually assigned as a percentage of the athlete's 1 repetition maximum. And the next step is step 6. So step 6 is volume. Volume can be classed as the total amount of the weight lifted in a resistance training session. So this is calculated by multiplying the weight used for each set for all exercise by the number of repetitions completed. So if 3 sets of bench press are completed, each for 10 repetitions using 80 kg, the total volume loads equals as 3 sets times 10 reps times 80 kg equal to, alright, you answered it, okay? So lastly is step 7, progression. From face to face over the course of a season, resistance training usually progress from general strength to sport-specific power and strength endurance. The in-season sees a reduction in training volume, where the goal is to maintain the gains made in off and pre-season phase. Alright, so that's all are the 7 steps that are crucial in building a training resistant, making a resistant training program. Okay guys, so next I'm going to pass to my team. Alright.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Ayub bin Roslan, and I will be going to explain about the training program. As we can say, resistance is the practice of motion against resistance, with an objective of improving a participant's ability to perform a specific athletic activity. Functional resistance training extends the same disciplines or principle to the entire body. In top clubs and fitness facilities throughout the country, functional strength training or functional resistance training has taken a different course in an aggressive way. Functional resistance training is a range of total body activities that build strength, balance, coordinations, and sometimes the core for general fitness, and improve your ability to perform in general or day-to-day activities. A strong build training program can give a huge impact on an athlete's lifetime. On this slide, I will explain an example of functional resistance training program. I will take the rugby sport as an example. This training program is specially constructed or built to supply the demand of the athlete, as the athlete is having an off-season for the rest of the month. This will explain a little bit further into the microcycle of the daily activities or training regimes for the athlete. As we can see here, there are tables of training, which consists of FITT principle, which is frequency, intensity, type, and time. The description is based on below. First is frequency. We will suggest the athlete to make an activities within 3 to 5 days a week to maximize his potential or his muscle building throughout the off season. For the second one is intensity. We will have the 3 sets and 10 to 12 reps per set. Other than that, we are going to talk about the type. It will consist of anaerobic training and aerobic training. Both of them is essential and very crucial for an athlete to survive during the off season. And the last one is time. The overall activities will accumulate within 20 minutes per session. According to what Anik has mentioned before, he already explained in general about the building of training program based on the 7 steps. But this time, I will explain a little bit using SASM guidelines. First, the training program itself consists of 4 main components, which is FITT, frequency, intensity, time, and type. Generally, sedentary people tend to exercise about 2 to 3 times a week in order to give them an ideal result. But for elite athletes, they must need to be hitting the weights at least 3 to 5 days per week. The research says that at the very least, training a minimum of 2 days per week is needed to maximize muscle growth. How you structure your workouts and the amount of days you devote to strength training or resistance training depends on your current fitness level. Okay, moving on to the last point of my slide, I will explain about the exercise, the sets, and the reps for the exercise. First, we are going to center of 5 different activities, which is single leg Romanian deadlift, front squat with barbell, reverse lunge with rotation, renegade row, and burpee to broad jump. Each of them will involve of 3 sets, and each set will consist of 10 to 12 reps.